Devil's Hunt is an action hack and slash game that left me wanting more in every department. This indie game is inspired by games like Devil May Cry, Dante's Inferno, and Bayonetta. Unfortunately, I didn't find it as fun as any of them. The most important thing in a game like this is gameplay, but a good story definitely helps motivate your player to continue as well. In Devil's Hunt, you play as Desmond, a boxer that dies and makes a pact with the devil in order to obtain powers and get revenge. I think the overarching story is actually quite interesting. However, the way it happens is sometimes a bit off. Pacing can be awkward and some character actions don't make much sense. The voice acting is for the most part actually very well done, but cutscenes can drag on, and when you start your playthrough, it'll actually be a very long time until you get to the actual meat of the game. Now let's get to gameplay. Like in Devil May Cry, you can change to different stances, which come with their own abilities. When you've attacked enough enemies and filled your fury bar, you'll also be able to unleash your inner demon, which makes you incredibly strong and sounds cooler than it actually is. You button mash for a few seconds and then go back to being normal. There's very little thought to the gameplay in that form. You don't get any new abilities or anything like that. And while I did feel really strong at first, it got old pretty quickly. Actually, the gameplay in your normal human form isn't far from that either. You have a light attack and heavy attack. There is no verticality, so you won't be able to launch enemies into the air, combo them, slam them down, etc. The gameplay boils down to mash your basic attacks and occasionally use your abilities that have a short cooldown. That wouldn't be a problem if it felt good to punch enemies, but it doesn't. Every attack lacks weight and doesn't feel satisfying to land. You can even execute enemies that are weak to get a set animation of you brutally killing the enemy, except it isn't very brutal. They all look like very weak punches and you aren't decimating your enemies with gory animations like you might hope you would. On top of that, playing the game with the controller isn't as perfect as it should be. For some reason, your two basic attacks are mapped to the right bumper and trigger. Why? Those buttons are not meant for constant mashing, so your fingers grow tired very quickly. The face buttons are reserved for your abilities. These abilities also feel quite weak. This attack, where you throw fire slashes through the air, doesn't really seem to impact enemies, it kinda just goes through them, and the animation is a little bit awkward. This attack, where you gently place a grenade on enemies only to have them detonate weakly later on, left me wanting more. And this portal that traps enemies is so easy to miss, because your character doesn't aim at the enemies when you try to throw it. All of this made gameplay feel like a chore a little bit, and it doesn't help that enemies feel quite spongy too. The game also tends to throw the same enemy types at you for an entire chapter, which you quickly grow sick of. To defend yourself, you can dodge or parry, although even they felt a bit off. Wished I could cancel my attacks with my evades or parries, but that's not possible, so that made combat feel quite clunky, because it felt like your character wasn't very responsive. Interestingly enough, the majority of the gameplay is not even combat, it's these walking sections. There is no jump button, so that also means there's no platforming that requires skill. Instead, you'll find yourself grounded, walking through uninspired looking environments that have you occasionally press a button to climb an obstacle or click on a hidden rune that will open the door you want to go through. I found it got incredibly tedious very quickly. When exploring or killing enemies, you'll eventually gather enough souls that allow you to purchase new skills. Fortunately, you can obtain these skills pretty quickly, and interestingly enough, you can instantly get a refund from any skill you've purchased and allocate them elsewhere. So this way you can actually play around with different builds at any point in the game without worrying about investing your points permanently. Aesthetically, the game looks pretty nice, however the animations can look very stiff, as I've already mentioned. Your character doesn't look at enemies when he fights them, and his jog looks very robotic. It just pulls me out of the moment. So in conclusion, I can tell effort went into the game's development. It's obviously an ambitious game from a relatively new studio, so I expected some jank coming in. But I just didn't end up having fun with the game, so I can't wholeheartedly recommend it. But my reviews are made as tools for you, so if you like what you've seen, there is a link in the description to buy the game, and you thought the video was overall useful, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.